Maeve Callahan, 32, stood frozen in her parents' living room, staring at the bank statement she'd accidentally discovered while looking for stamps in her father's desk. $250,000, transferred to Whitney Callahan, boutique startup. The same amount her parents had firmly refused to lend her for her now thriving tech company last year. The betrayal burned in her chest as she heard her family laughing on the patio, completely unaware that their perfect facade was about to come crashing down. Hey there, I hope that hook caught your attention. Before I dive deeper into this family drama that changed my life forever, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. If you enjoy family karma stories like mine, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more real-life experiences that might just help you navigate your own family dynamics. Now let me take you back to where this all began. I grew up in suburban Connecticut, the older of two daughters, in what appeared to be the picture-perfect American family. My father, Richard Callahan, built a successful accounting firm from the ground up, while my mother, Eleanor, managed the household with precision and grace. My sister, Whitney, was 5 years younger, and from the moment she arrived, there was something different about how our parents treated us. I was the responsible one, the planner, the achiever. I graduated valedictorian, earned a full scholarship to MIT, and landed a prestigious job at a tech firm in Boston after college. My parents applauded my achievements, but always with a certain restraint, as if success was simply expected of me. Whitney, meanwhile, floated through life on charm and spontaneity. When she dropped out of college to find herself, my parents funded her year-long trip to Europe. When she totaled her car, they bought her a new one without question. I told myself it was just because she was younger that they'd raised me to be independent and her to be dependent. I convinced myself that one day they'd see the imbalance and correct it. That delusion shattered the day I approached them about my business idea. After 6 years in the corporate world, I developed an innovative software platform that helped small businesses manage their customer relationships more efficiently and affordably than existing solutions. My colleagues were impressed, my beta testers were enthusiastic, and my business plan was solid. All I needed was startup capital. I sat my parents down during a weekend visit home and pitched my idea professionally with market research, financial projections, and a clear repayment plan. I asked for a $250,000 loan, explaining that I'd already invested my entire savings of $75,000 and maxed out my personal credit. That's a lot of money, Maeve, my father said, frowning at the business plan I'd printed out for him. The tech industry is so volatile. But Dad, you've seen the numbers. The return on investment. Numbers on paper aren't reality, he interrupted. I've seen too many startups fail. My mother placed her hand on my knee in that patronizing way she had. Sweetheart, we've always taught you to be responsible. Taking on debt for a risky venture doesn't seem like the right move. It's not debt if you're investing in something with real value, I countered. And it's not like I'm asking for charity. This is a loan with interest. My father closed the folder. The answer is no, Maeve. We're not comfortable putting our retirement funds at risk. I left that weekend feeling dejected but not defeated. Their refusal hurt, but it didn't surprise me. I'd always made my own way, and this would be no different. I secured a small business loan from a bank, albeit at a higher interest rate than what I'd hoped for from my parents, and maxed out 2 new credit cards. I worked 18-hour days sleeping on a futon in my tiny rented office space. I ate ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches for months. I built my company App Connect from nothing but determination and the unshakable belief in my vision. By some miracle, or rather by relentless hard work, App Connect began to gain traction. 6 months in, we secured our first major client. 9 months in, we were featured in a tech industry magazine. At the 1-year mark, we were profitable with a small but growing team of 6 employees. I called my parents to share the good news. "That's wonderful, honey," my mother said, sounding genuinely pleased. "We're so proud of you." "We always knew you could do it on your own," my father added. "You've proven yourself." Their approval should have felt good, but something in my father's choice of words bothered me. On your own. As if the struggle had been the point all along. As if my success meant more because they'd made it harder for me to achieve. 2 weeks later, Whitney called me bubbling with excitement. She was moving back to Connecticut from California and had a brilliant new business idea she wanted to tell me about. She'd been working as a personal stylist for wealthy clients in Los Angeles, and now she wanted to open a high-end boutique in our hometown that offered personalized styling services. "It's going to be revolutionary for the area," she gushed. "Nothing like this exists here yet." I was skeptical but supportive. "That sounds interesting. Have you put together a business plan, run the numbers?" "Oh, you know I'm not good with all that stuff," she laughed. "But Mom and Dad are helping me figure it all out. Dad's actually meeting with commercial real estate agents next week to look at spaces." I felt a twinge of unease. "They're helping with the location scouting." "Well, yeah, they're investing in the business, so they want to make sure everything's perfect." My heart dropped. "They're investing how much I don't know exactly. Enough to get everything started properly. The location, inventory, website, all that. Dad says doing it right from the beginning is key." I ended the call feeling numb. My sister's boutique idea wasn't inherently bad, but it wasn't innovative either. She had no business experience, no track record of commitment to any professional endeavor, and the location she'd chosen, our affluent but small hometown, had limited market potential compared to a larger city. Yet my parents were investing. Not loaning, investing. The distinction wasn't lost on me. For weeks after learning about my parents' investment in Whitney's boutique, I tried to push down my feelings of betrayal. I focused on my growing business, on my clients, and my team. I told myself that what my parents did with their money was their choice, that I had no right to feel slighted. But the resentment festered. When Thanksgiving rolled around, I almost made an excuse not to go home. But some masochistic part of me needed to see it, needed to witness firsthand whatever preferential treatment Whitney was receiving. The family dinner was predictably uncomfortable. Whitney dominated the conversation with tales of her boutique preparations, the exotic suppliers she'd found, the exclusive brands she'd secured, the interior designer she'd hired. My father nodded approvingly at every detail while my mother beamed with pride. "And the location Dad found is just perfect," Whitney gushed, helping herself to more wine. "Right on Main Street with those gorgeous display windows. The rent is steep, but Daddy says location is everything in retail." I stabbed at my turkey. "What's the monthly overhead looking like?" Whitney waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, I don't worry about those details. Dad's handling all the boring financial stuff." My father cleared his throat. "We've got it under control, Maeve. The important thing is that Whitney's pursuing her passion." "Pursuing her passion," I repeated slowly. "With your financial backing." My mother sensed the tension. "Maeve has already proven she doesn't need our help," she said brightly. "She's doing so well on her own." "That's not the point," I said, setting down my fork. "When I came to you with a solid business plan, market research, and years of relevant experience, you said investing was too risky. You said you couldn't put your retirement at risk. What changed?" My father's expression hardened. "That's different." "Whitney's situation, how is it different?" I demanded. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're willing to invest in Whitney's untested venture while you left me to struggle and potentially fail." "We're just trying to give your sister the same advantages you've had," my mother interjected. I laughed incredulously. "What advantages? I worked my way through college with my scholarship." I saved every penny for years. I built my business on maxed out credit cards and sleepless nights while living on ramen. Please tell me what advantages I had. You've always been the capable one, my father said, as if that explained everything. Whitney needs more support. So I get punished for being capable. Whitney gets rewarded for being. What less capable? Whitney's face crumpled. That's not fair, Maeve. You're so mean sometimes. I'm not being mean, I'm stating facts, I replied, feeling the years of suppressed resentment bubbling up. How much did they invest in your boutique, Whitney? Was it $250? 000. The exact amount I asked to borrow, not be given, but to borrow with interest. The sudden silence in the room confirmed my suspicion. My mother looked away, unable to meet my eyes. You know what the worst part is? I continued, my voice shaking. It's not even about the money. I've succeeded without your help. It's about what the money represents. It's about knowing that no matter what I achieve, no matter how responsible or successful I am, I will always be worth less to you than Whitney. My father's face reddened. That is absolutely untrue, Maeve. We love you both equally. Love isn't just words, Dad. It's actions. And your actions have been crystal clear my entire life. I stood up, no longer hungry. I need to get some air. As I walked out onto the porch, I heard Whitney crying and my mother consoling her. Typical. Even in this moment, when I was the one who had been wronged, Whitney somehow made herself the victim, and my parents rushed to comfort her. I sat on the porch swing, watching my breath cloud in the cold November air when the door opened behind me. It was my father. You embarrassed your sister in there, he said, his tone accusatory. That's what you're concerned about right now, Whitney's feelings. He sighed heavily, sitting beside me on the swing. Look, Maeve. You and your sister are different people with different needs. Whitney isn't as resourceful as you are. She needs more guidance, more support. And whose fault is that? You've been coddling her since childhood. You've never let her face consequences or learn to stand on her own. We're trying to help her succeed in a way that works for her. At my expense, I asked. Do you have any idea how it felt to be drowning in debt, working myself to exhaustion knowing you could have helped, but chose not to? We made the decision we thought was right at the time. No, you made the decision that was easiest for you. It was easier to tell the competent daughter no, because you knew she'd figure it out anyway. It was easier to say yes to the dependent daughter because you didn't want to deal with her disappointment. My father was quiet for a long moment. Maybe there's some truth to that, he finally admitted. But it doesn't mean we love you any less. Actions speak louder than words, Dad. And your actions tell me exactly where I stand in this family. I stood up, pulling my coat tighter around me. I should go. Tell Mom I'm sorry for disrupting dinner, but I'm not sorry for what I said. It needed to be said. As I drove away from my childhood home that night, I felt something shift inside me. The fantasy of the loving, fair family I'd clung to for so many years was finally shattered. In its place was the cold reality I was valued differently than my sister, and nothing I did would ever change that fundamental inequality. Instead of crushing me, though, this realization was strangely liberating. I no longer needed to seek their approval or validation. I could stop expecting fairness where none existed. I could focus entirely on building my own life, my own success, on my own terms. Little did I know that the universe had a way of balancing the scales in unexpected ways. Over the next 6 months, I threw myself into my work with renewed vigor. App Connect was growing exponentially. We'd expanded to a team of 15 and moved into a proper office space in downtown Boston. I rarely went home to Connecticut, making excuses for Christmas and my father's birthday. The few times I spoke with my mother on the phone, our conversations were strained and superficial. Meanwhile, Whitney's boutique, styled by Whitney, opened with a lavish party that I declined to attend. Based on the photos my mother texted me, it was indeed in a prime location with expensive fixtures and an impressively curated inventory. Whitney's beaming face was in every shot, surrounded by adoring local socialites and our visibly proud parents. I didn't wish failure on my sister. Despite everything, I wanted her to succeed for her own sake and to justify my parents' investment in her. But I also couldn't pretend to be enthusiastic about a venture that symbolized such painful favoritism. As spring turned to summer, my occasional check-ins with my mother revealed troubling signs. Whitney's boutique wasn't performing as expected. The overhead was high and sales were inconsistent. The wealthy women of our hometown were browsing more than buying, and the personalized styling services weren't catching on. "Your sister's working so hard," my mother said during one call. "She's at the shop 7 days a week." This surprised me. Whitney had never been one for sustained effort or consistent work habits. "That's good," I replied neutrally. "Building a business takes total commitment. Your father's helping with the books on weekends. He says they just need to weather this initial adjustment period." I recognized the concern beneath my mother's forced optimism. "Is he having to put in more money?" A hesitation. "Just a little. For inventory adjustments. Whitney's learning what sells and what doesn't." Translation. The boutique was hemorrhaging money and my father was covering the losses. By August, the situation had deteriorated further. I heard from my cousin Megan that Whitney had let go of both her employees and was running the shop alone, often closing early because she had appointments. My father, who should have been enjoying semi-retirement, was spending most days at the boutique trying to salvage the failing business. One Tuesday afternoon, I received an unexpected call from Whitney herself. "Maeve," she said, her voice small and uncharacteristically humble. "I need your help." Part of me wanted to remind her that she'd never shown interest in my business expertise before, but I restrained myself. "What's going on? The boutique is in trouble," she admitted. "We're not making enough to cover expenses, and Dad says we need to make some hard decisions." "What kind of hard decisions? Like closing down?" She started to cry. "I've tried everything, Maeve. Different inventory, special events, social media, marketing. Nothing works. People browse but don't buy, or they try things on and then order similar items online for less." I felt a complex mix of emotions: sympathy for my sister's distress, concern about my parents' financial situation, and, if I'm being honest, a small, dark flicker of validation. The Golden Child's venture was failing despite all the advantages and support she'd received. "Have you looked at your pricing structure?" I asked, shifting into problem-solving mode. "Your overhead costs, your marketing strategy, Dad's handling all that." She sniffled. "He says we're just not generating enough revenue to justify the expenses." "And how much have they invested so far?" I asked carefully. Another hesitation. "The initial investment was $250. 000, she confirmed, unaware of how that specific number twisted the knife. "But Dad's had to put in more. I don't know exactly how much." I closed my eyes, imagining my parents' retirement savings draining away into Whitney's failing venture. Despite everything, I didn't want them to suffer financially in their later years. "What do you want from me, Whitney?" I asked directly. Would you consider investing? Or maybe a loan? Just enough to keep us afloat until the holiday season. Dad says if we can make it to Christmas shopping, we might be able to turn things around." I almost laughed at the irony. "You want me to invest in your struggling business after Mom and Dad refused to invest in my successful one? I know it sounds bad when you put it that way," she said quietly. "But I don't know where else to turn. Dad's tapped out and Mom's worried sick about their retirement. The responsible, caring part of me wanted to help, if not for Whitney's sake, then for my parents. But another part, the part that still smarted from years of unequal treatment, resisted. "I need to think about it," I said finally. And I'd want to see the books before making any decision. Of course, Whitney agreed quickly. Dad can send you everything. Thank you, Maeve. I know I don't deserve your help, but I'm really grateful you're considering it. After we hung up, I sat at my desk for a long time, turning the situation over in my mind. My company was doing well, but we were in a growth phase, reinvesting most of our profits. I had some personal savings I could tap, but did I want to pour my hard-earned money into my sister's failing boutique, a business I had serious doubts about from the beginning? The next day, my father emailed me the boutique's financial records. They were worse than I expected. The business had been operating at a loss since opening day, with declining sales each month, despite additional cash infusions. All told, my parents had invested nearly $400, well beyond the initial $250, and potentially a devastating blow to their retirement security. I called my father directly. Dad, these numbers are alarming. I know, he said, sounding exhausted. We've tried everything. Why didn't you cut your losses sooner? I asked, struggling to keep accusation out of my tone. A heavy sigh. You know your sister. She was so passionate about this, so convinced it would work if we just gave it more time, tried a different approach, and we wanted to support her dream. At the expense of your financial security, we thought it would turn around, he said defensively. Retail can be unpredictable. I took a deep breath. Dad, as someone who's built a successful business, I have to tell you this isn't just a rough patch. The fundamentals aren't there. The location is expensive, the target market is too small, and the concept isn't differentiated enough from online alternatives. So you won't help, he concluded. I didn't say that. But throwing good money after bad isn't the answer. If I get involved, things would have to change dramatically. There was a long pause. What kind of changes? For starters, downsizing to a smaller, less expensive location, pivoting the business model to focus more on online sales with the physical location as a showroom rather than carrying extensive inventory, rebranding to target a broader demographic. And Whitney would need to commit to following a strict business plan, not just doing what feels right in the moment. She won't like those ideas, my father warned. Then she's not serious about saving the business, I replied. And neither of you is serious about accepting my help. 2 days after my conversation with my father, I received a text from Whitney. Can we meet in person? I'll come to Boston this weekend. I agreed, suggesting a Saturday morning coffee at my favorite cafe near my apartment. When Whitney arrived, I barely recognized her. Gone was the polished, bubbly sister I remembered, replaced by someone who looked tired and defeated. Her designer clothes had been swapped for jeans and a simple sweater, her usually perfect hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail. Thanks for seeing me, she said, sliding into the booth across from me. And for reviewing our financials. It's what you asked for, I replied, still maintaining emotional distance. She wrapped her hands around her coffee mug, staring into it as if it might offer solutions. Dad told me about your suggestions. About downsizing, going online, changing everything. Those are my professional recommendations based on the numbers, I said. The current model isn't sustainable. I know, her voice was small. I thought it would be different. I thought people would love the boutique as much as I did, that they'd value the personal styling, the curated selection. I softened slightly. It's not that your concept is bad, Whitney, but business isn't just about passion or good ideas. It's about execution, market fit, cost structure, dozens of practical considerations. Things you understand and I don't, she said with a hint of bitterness. Things I've learned through experience and education, I corrected. Things you could learn, too, if you were willing. She looked up at me then, her eyes swimming with tears. I've failed, haven't I? Completely and totally. And I've taken Mom and Dad's retirement money down with me. The admission, so raw and vulnerable, cracked my carefully maintained armor. This wasn't the spoiled, favored sister I'd resented for years. This was just a person, flawed human suffering. The business has failed, I said gently. That doesn't mean you're a failure. Most new businesses don't succeed, especially first attempts. But most people don't lose their parents' life savings in the process. She countered, a tear spilling down her cheek. God, Maeve, they invested everything in me. They believed in me when I didn't even believe in myself, and I let them down so spectacularly. I reached across the table and took her hand. Why did you start the boutique, Whitney? Really? She seemed surprised by the question. I wanted to prove myself, I guess. To have something that was mine, something successful, like what I have. She nodded reluctantly. Partly. You've always been the star of the family, Maeve. The smart one, the capable one. Mom and Dad talk about your accomplishments constantly. This revelation startled me. They do. All the time. Maeve graduated top of her class. Maeve got another promotion. Maeve started her own company. I've spent my whole life feeling like I'm living in your shadow. I struggled to reconcile this with my own perception. But they've always given you everything. Financial support, emotional support. They invested in your business when they refused to invest in mine. Whitney looked genuinely confused. They refused to invest in your business when last year, before I started AppConnect, I asked for exactly the same amount they gave you, $250, 000 as a loan, not even an investment. They said no, that it was too risky. I had no idea, Whitney said, seeming genuinely shocked. They never told me that. When I came to them with my boutique idea, they were immediately supportive. Dad said investing in family was important. A heavy silence fell between us as we both processed this revelation. Had our parents deliberately kept us in the dark about their differential treatment, or had they somehow justified it so completely to themselves that they didn't even recognize the disparity? I'm so sorry, Maeve, Whitney, finally, he said. If I'd known, I never would have accepted their money. Or at least I would have insisted they treat you equally. I believed her. Despite our complicated relationship, Whitney had never been deliberately malicious. What are you going to do now? I asked. She sighed heavily. I don't know. Dad wants to close the boutique at the end of the month. Cut our losses. And what do you want? Honestly, I want to make this right somehow. For Mom and Dad and for you. She hesitated, then added, I've been thinking about your suggestions. About pivoting to online, finding a smaller space. It makes sense, but I don't have the skills to execute that kind of transition. I took a slow sip of my coffee, considering my next words carefully. A plan was forming in my mind, one that could potentially help my family heal while also making business sense. What if we worked together? I suggested. AppConnect has a retail module that could help streamline your online operations. We could develop a case study using your boutique as an example, showcasing how our software helps small businesses transition from brick and mortar to omnichannel. Whitney's eyes widened. You'd do that. Help me salvage this mess. Not for free, I clarified. I'd buy in as a partner at a fair valuation based on the current assets, not what was invested. I'd provide the tech infrastructure and business guidance. You'd bring your styling expertise and customer relationships. We'd build something new together. Something that might actually work. But why would you do this, after how unfairly you've been treated? It was a good question, one I'd been asking myself since the idea first occurred to me. Partly because I think there's actually a viable business hidden inside the current failing one if it's properly structured and managed. Partly because I don't want to see Mom and Dad financially ruined. And partly because I paused, surprised by the emotion welling up in my throat. Partly because you're my sister, Whitney. And maybe it's time we stopped being defined by our parents' treatment of us and started defining our relationship on our own terms. Whitney's face crumpled, and she began to cry in earnest. I don't deserve your kindness. I've been so wrapped up in my own insecurities that I never saw how unfair things were for you. We've both been stuck in patterns that were established when we were children, I said. Maybe it's time we both broke free. As we continued talking that morning, something shifted between us, a lifetime of competition and resentment giving way to the possibility of genuine understanding and collaboration. We sketched out ideas for the reimagined business on cafe napkins, Whitney's styling knowledge complementing my business acumen in ways that surprised us both. For the first time, we were seeing each other as we truly were, not through the distorted lens of our parents' treatment. It felt like the beginning of something new, something healthier and more authentic than anything we'd shared before. Before I tell you what happened next with our business partnership, I want to take a moment to connect with you, my viewers. This turning point in my relationship with Whitney taught me so much about family dynamics and healing old wounds. Have you ever experienced a similar breakthrough with a family member? How did you navigate those complicated emotions of resentment and forgiveness? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one and would love to hear your perspective. And if you're finding value in my story, please hit that like button and subscribe to join our community of people working through family challenges. Now let's get back to what happened after Whitney and I decided to work together. The Monday after my coffee with Whitney, I called an emergency meeting with my executive team at AppConnect. I presented the idea of acquiring Whitney's struggling boutique as a case study and development opportunity for our retail module. I was transparent about the family connection, but emphasized the business rationale. We needed a real-world testing ground for our software, and this presented a ready-made opportunity at a bargain price. My team was skeptical at first. Maya, my CFO, pointed out the potential conflicts of interest. Ethan, my head of product, questioned whether a failing boutique was the right showcase for our technology. I understand your concerns, I acknowledged, and if this were purely a family bailout, I wouldn't bring it to the table. But I genuinely believe there's potential here if we approach it strategically. I outlined the plan. We would form a new entity separate from AppConnect but using our technology. I would personally invest in this entity alongside a modest corporate investment that would give us the case study and testimonials we needed for marketing. Whitney would contribute her existing inventory and customer list as her investment adjusted for the current valuation. The boutique fails because it's overextended and underutilizing technology, I explained. But the styling expertise and customer relationships have value. We can leverage those while fixing the fundamental business issues. After thorough discussion and due diligence, my team cautiously approved the plan. We would allocate a limited budget and resources to the project with clear metrics for success and a timeline for evaluation. The next challenge was presenting the proposal to my parents. Whitney and I decided to do this together at their home in Connecticut. We sat them down in the living room, the same room where I'd asked for their investment over a year ago and where they'd refused. We have a proposition. I began, handing them each a folder containing our business plan. Whitney and I are going to restructure and revitalize the boutique as partners. My father frowned, flipping through the documents. Partners, how would that work? I'll invest in the business at its current valuation, I explained. Whitney will contribute her expertise and existing assets. We'll downsize the physical location, build out the online presence using AppConnect's technology, and focus on high-margin, personalized styling services rather than inventory-heavy retail. My mother looked bewildered. But you two have never worked together on anything. Whitney smiled at me. That's about to change. We walked them through the plan step by step. How we'd cut the overhead by 70% by moving to a smaller space. How we'd transition to a showroom model with limited inventory and faster turnover. How we'd use technology to track customer preferences and automate follow-ups. how we'd expand beyond our local market through e-commerce while maintaining the personal touch through video styling consultations. My father seemed both impressed and slightly defensive. This is all very sophisticated. But Whitney's boutique has its own character, its own vision. A vision that's costing $20,000 a month in losses. I reminded him gently. This plan preserves the essence of what Whitney created while making it financially viable. And I'm fully on board with these changes, Whitney added, surprising me with her firmness. I've learned some hard lessons, Dad. I started this business thinking passion was enough, but Maeve's taught me that passion needs to be paired with pragmatism. My mother's eyes filled with tears. I don't understand. When did you two start getting along like this? Whitney and I exchanged glances. We had an honest conversation, I said, about the business, about our relationship, about the way we've been treated differently over the years. My father stiffened. We've always tried to give you both what you needed, which wasn't the same as treating us equally, I pointed out. But this isn't about rehashing old grievances. It's about moving forward together as adults, making our own choices. Whitney reached over and squeezed my hand. Maeve is giving me a chance to salvage something from this situation, to learn and grow, instead of just failing. And I'm grateful for that. After much discussion, my parents reluctantly agreed to the plan. My father seemed particularly uncomfortable with relinquishing control over Whitney's business affairs, but the mounting financial losses left him with little choice. We assured them they would have no further financial obligations, no more cash infusions required, which visibly relieved my mother. Over the next 3 months, Whitney and I worked intensively to transform the boutique. We terminated the expensive Main Street lease, paying a penalty that still cost less than 2 more months of operation, and found a charming space on a side street at 1/3 the rent. We liquidated excess inventory through a series of flash sales and consigned the remaining high-end pieces to a luxury resale platform. I brought in AppConnect's design team to create a sleek, user-friendly website that showcased Whitney's styling vision and allowed customers to book both in-person and virtual consultations. We integrated inventory management software that automatically updated both our physical and online showrooms, eliminating the manual processes that had consumed so much of Whitney's time. Most surprisingly, Whitney threw herself into learning the business side with unexpected enthusiasm. She completed online courses in retail management, devoured books on e-commerce, and shadowed my meetings with investors and clients. Her natural charm and emotional intelligence, when channeled into purposeful business relationships, proved remarkably effective. I never gave myself the chance to be good at this part, she confessed one evening, as we reviewed the week's metrics over takeout in the newly renovated boutique space. It was easier to let Dad handle it, to stay in my comfort zone of picking pretty things and talking to customers. You're a quick study, I acknowledged, genuinely impressed by her progress. And you have instincts I don't like, knowing immediately which styles will resonate with specific customer demographics. She smiled, pleased by the compliment. We make a good team, don't we? Who would have thought? Indeed, our complementary skills were creating something neither of us could have built alone. The rebranded business, now called Curated by Callahan, acknowledging our partnership, launched with a digital-first approach that maintained the high-touch personal service Whitney excelled at, while operating under a much more sustainable cost structure. To our mutual surprise, the business began to show promising signs of life almost immediately. The personal styling sessions, now offered both in-person and virtually, became our most profitable service. Whitney's existing clients responded enthusiastically to the new model, and the case study articles AppConnect published about the transformation brought in new customers from beyond our local area. By the 6-month mark, Curated by Callahan was breaking even. By 9 months, it was turning a modest profit. The success was gratifying professionally, but the personal growth was even more significant. Whitney and I had developed a genuine partnership based on mutual respect and complementary strengths, something neither of us had thought possible a year earlier. My parents' reaction to this transformation was complex. They were clearly relieved that the financial hemorrhaging had stopped and impressed by the business's new direction. But I also sensed a certain discomfort, particularly from my father at witnessing our independence from his influence. The dynamic had shifted, and for the first time in our lives, Whitney and I were defining our relationship with our parents on our own terms. A year after Whitney and I had formed our partnership, Curated by Callahan was not just surviving but thriving. We'd expanded our virtual styling services to clients across the country, launched a subscription box curated specifically to each client's preferences, and even developed a proprietary algorithm with help from my App Connect team that helped predict seasonal trends for our inventory purchasing. What had begun as a rescue mission had evolved into a genuinely successful business venture. Whitney had blossomed as a businesswoman, discovering talents she never knew she possessed when freed from our parents' limiting expectations. And I had found unexpected fulfillment in mentoring my sister and applying my tech expertise to a completely different industry. Our parents remained supportive but distant, visiting the boutique occasionally and making appropriate noises of approval. I sensed that they were struggling to find their place in this new family configuration where their daughters were allies rather than rivals, where their financial support was no longer needed or sought. The true turning point in our family dynamic came unexpectedly during our parents' 40th anniversary. Whitney and I had planned a small celebration at their home, nothing elaborate, just family and a few close friends. We'd hired a caterer arranged for flowers and prepared a photo slideshow chronicling their life together. As I was setting up the laptop for the slideshow in my father's study, I noticed a folder on his desk, labeled Estate Planning. I wouldn't have given it a second thought except a page was partially sticking out with both Whitney's name and mine visible on it. I hesitated, knowing I shouldn't snoop, but something compelled me to peek at that single visible page. What I saw made my blood run cold. It was a draft of my parents' will dated just before Whitney had opened her boutique. And there, in black and white, was the explanation for everything they had planned to leave Whitney 75% of their estate, with the remaining 25% going to me. Their justification noted in the margin in my father's handwriting: Maeve is already financially secure and successful. Whitney will need more support throughout her life. I quickly closed the folder, my hands shaking. All these years I'd sensed the imbalance, felt the different expectations, resented the unequal support. But seeing it quantified so precisely, 25% versus 75%, was still a shock. I made it through the anniversary party, somehow smiling in all the right places, toasting their happiness, helping Whitney serve cake. But inside I was processing this new information, trying to decide what, if anything, to do with it. That night, after the guests had left and our parents had gone to bed, Whitney and I stayed behind to clean up. As we worked side by side in the kitchen, loading the dishwasher and packaging leftover food, I found myself unable to keep my discovery to myself. "I saw something in Dad's office today," I said quietly. "Something I probably wasn't supposed to see." Whitney looked up, curious. "What was it? Their will? Or a draft of it from last year?" I took a deep breath. They were planning to split their estate 75 to 25, with you getting the larger portion. Whitney stopped what she was doing, her face paling. "That can't be right. Why would they do that?" the note said. "I was already successful and secure, while you would need more support." She shook her head vehemently. "That's not fair. That's not right." Her immediate reaction, so unequivocal in my favor, soothed something in me. It's consistent with how they've always treated us. Different expectations, different levels of support. But to make it so explicit, Whitney looked genuinely disturbed. Maeve, I don't want that. I never asked for that. I know you didn't. We need to talk to them about this, she insisted. Tomorrow before we leave. This pattern has to stop. I was surprised by her determination. Are you sure? It's their money, their choice. It's not just about the money, Whitney said firmly. It's about respect, about acknowledging that you deserve the same consideration I do, about stopping this cycle of treating you like you don't need anything just because you're capable. The next morning, Whitney and I cornered our parents in the living room before our scheduled departures. My sister took the lead, surprising me with her directness. We saw the draft of your will, she stated without preamble. The one that splits your estate 7/5 inches, my favor. My parents exchanged alarmed glances. My father's face reddened. You had no right to go through my private papers. It was an accident, I interjected. But now that we know we need to talk about it, my mother looked distressed. We were only trying to plan responsibly. Maeve, you've always been so independent, so capable of taking care of yourself. That doesn't mean I deserve less consideration, I said quietly. That I'm less your child than Whitney is. My father shifted uncomfortably. Of course not. We love you both equally. But you don't treat us equally, Whitney pointed out. You never have. You've always expected Maeve to succeed on her own while cushioning me from every potential failure. And look where that got us. Me nearly bankrupting you because I never learned to stand on my own, and Maeve building her success despite your lack of support. I was moved by my sister's passionate defense. My parents looked stunned, unaccustomed to Whitney being the one to confront them. I don't want 75% of your estate, Whitney continued. I don't deserve it. If anything, Maeve deserves more for all the years you've shortchanged her. We never meant to shortchange anyone, my mother protested weakly. Intent doesn't change impact, I said. The message your choices sent was clear. Whitney was worth investing in. I wasn't. My father stood up abruptly, pacing the room. This is absurd. Everything we've done has been with both your best interests at heart. Then prove it, Whitney challenged. Change the will. Split everything equally. And more importantly, change how you treat us going forward. Acknowledge Maeve's accomplishments without adding qualifiers about how she doesn't need your help. Support her efforts the way you've supported mine. My father looked at me, really looked at me perhaps for the first time in years. Is that what you want, Maeve? For us to treat you the same as Whitney, I want you to value us equally, I said carefully. That doesn't mean treating us identically in every situation. It means acknowledging that my independence wasn't innate, it was something I developed because I had to. And it means recognizing that always rescuing Whitney denied her the chance to develop her own strength. A heavy silence fell over the room. My mother was quietly crying. My father looked both defensive and thoughtful. We'll consider what you've said, he finally offered, and review our estate planning. It wasn't the full acknowledgement I'd hoped for, but it was something, a crack in the foundation of our family's dysfunctional dynamic. As Whitney and I drove to the train station together afterward, I felt lighter somehow, as if naming the inequality had diminished its power over me. Thank you, I told her, for standing up for me like that. She squeezed my hand. That's what partners do, right? Have each other's backs. Partners. Not just in business, but in navigating the complicated terrain of our family relationships. It was a new role for both of us, and one I was growing to treasure. 2 years have passed since Whitney and I confronted our parents about their unequal treatment. In that time, Curated by Callahan has become a 7-figure business with a national clientele and a team of 15 stylists trained in Whitney's personalized approach. App Connect has grown as well recently, securing a major round of funding that valued the company at $50 million. More importantly, the family dynamics have slowly but steadily improved. True to their word, our parents revised their estate plan to treat us equally. But the real change has been in their day-to-day behavior. The way my father now calls me for business advice. The way my mother celebrates Whitney's developing independence. Last month, they surprised us both by announcing their intention to formally retire and move to a smaller home in Florida. We've set aside a portion of our savings as an investment fund, my father explained during a family dinner. Equal amounts for each of you to use for your businesses, or however you see fit. No strings attached. Whitney and I exchanged glances across the table, a silent acknowledgement of how far we'd all come. The money itself wasn't particularly significant to either of us at this point. Both our businesses were self-sustaining and profitable. But the symbolism of equal treatment freely given meant everything. As for my relationship with Whitney, what began as a reluctant business partnership has evolved into a deep friendship. We still have our differences. She's still more intuitive, where I'm more analytical. She's still more people-oriented, where I focus on systems and processes. But we've learned to see those differences as complementary rather than competitive as strengths, to be combined rather than compared. The family betrayal that once felt so devastating turned out to be the catalyst for something unexpected, authentic relationships based on who we actually are, not who our parents perceived us to be or needed us to be. In losing the fantasy of the perfect family, we gained something more valuable. The messy, complicated, but ultimately more fulfilling reality of genuine connection. I hope my story resonates with some of you out there who might be navigating your own family dynamics. Have you experienced your own version of family karma or justice being served? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story touched you, or you know someone who might benefit from hearing it, please hit that like button, subscribe to my channel for more real-life stories, and share with friends who might be struggling with similar family issues. Thank you for listening to my journey from betrayal to redemption. Sometimes the greatest family lessons come through the most painful experiences. Until next time, remember that true family bonds can be rebuilt even after they're broken.